I was supposed to be the disposable younger brother in this dark romance novel, the one destined to die early to help the heroine fulfill her twisted love story. But after I was reborn, I crippled my gambling addict father, sabotaged the deal to marry off my sister, and even nipped her psycho love interest in the bud. I sent the CEO, who was supposed to lock her in his basement, packing to chase some other woman, and now the plot has gone haywire, like a badly rewritten piece of code, twisting into a desperate race for survival for both of us. It wasn't until years later, when my sister stood behind a glass wall, offering me her hand and saying, "Come, be my director of security," that I realized what I'd truly rewritten wasn't just her love life, but also my own pathetic existence as a DoorDash driver from past life. In this new timeline, the only role I ever truly mastered was the simplest one of all, her little brother. I was reborn. I became the heroine's younger brother in a dark romance novel. It's the kind of story they label a sweet romance, but sweet is just a code word for Stockholm Syndrome. According to the original script, my entire family was slated for an early grave. To stay alive, I made a decision. I had to beat this twisted plot into submission. When my dad went out to gamble, I beat the hell out of him. When my mom and grandma played favorites, I beat the hell out of him. When they tried to marry my sister off to some decrepit old creep, I still beat the hell out of my dad. Don't people always say, spare the rod, spoil the child? If a stick can straighten out a brat, then it can sure as hell straighten out a deadbeat gambler of a father, a checked out mother, and a grandmother who sees only what she wants to see. As long as I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty, I could train them to be the most respectable family on the street. In the original story, my sister, Miriam, was supposed to be locked in a basement by a psycho CEO when she turned 20. To win her over, the madman decided to wipe out our entire family. Years later, I've completely rewritten that narrative. Now, Miriam is the powerful CEO calling all the shots, and she just personally invited me to head up the security department at her company. All I can say is, in my last life, I was a DoorDash driver, which barely made me the prince of delivery boys. In this life, I've finally lived up to my name. Edward, guardian of the pride. The moment I opened my eyes, I knew my whole world had been swapped out for a new one. I had fallen into a dark romance novel. The romance was just a cover. The real story was about captivity. My sister, Miriam, is the heroine of this book. As fate would have it, on her 20th birthday, she's scheduled to be locked in a basement by a rich and unhinged billionaire. And to prove his love, that maniac will personally send our entire family to their graves. Our family was a walking collection of dysfunctional cliches. My dad, Rick, was a gambling addict. My mom, Brenda, along with my grandma, June, were the poster children for preferring sons over daughters. The whole family revolved around me, their precious son, the golden child who would carry on the family name. They treated their daughter like dust and worshipped their son like a king. And my sister, Miriam, was the classic damsel in distress, destined to be locked away in a dark room and handed over to some twisted deviant. My name is Edward. I took a deep breath. I knew this script had to be rewritten. The only question was where to start. Now, I have a certain quality that isn't exactly flattering. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but my fists get the job done. I'm a simple, brutally direct kind of guy. I've always been a straight shooter. In my past life, when I wanted to live in a mansion, I got a job as a cleaner in one. When I wanted to drive a Maserati, I applied to be a chauffeur. When I wanted to be president, I just went ahead and legally changed my name to president. Whatever I want, I become. No build-up, no waiting. Just a simple, I want it now. So instead of waiting for that psycho CEO to follow the script and annihilate my family, I decided to strike first. If spare the rod, spoil the child works for kids, then by that logic, a good beating could also produce a decent father, a responsible mother, and a sweet, kind grandmother. And that brings us to the present moment. I'm walking out of my room, rolling pin in hand. The only question on my mind is who gets it first today. I'd barely stepped outside when a commotion erupted in the yard. My dad was home. A middle-aged man, thin as a wire, was stomping menacingly toward the house. His face was a mask of frustration and rage. You could tell he'd gambled away everything again. He looked so foul that if a stray dog had crossed his path, he would have kicked it without a second thought. My mom and grandma trailed behind him, already bickering. "I told you not to let him go out," my mom shrieked. "What if he went out? He's my son." Grandma June shot back, her voice even louder. "He was trying to win big for this family. Win big my foot. He took the last of the money we had," my mom snapped. "That was my son's emergency fund. If I say he can take it, he can take it," Grandma retorted. I stood in the doorway listening and let out a small laugh. The cozy family atmosphere in this house was a special brand of toxic. My dad, seething with anger, stormed into the yard. My sister, Miriam, was crouched by the spigot, washing clothes in a basin. She looked up at him and flinched instinctively. instinctively. My dad strode over and kicked the basin, sending it flying. Soapy water splashed everywhere. "All you do is wash these stupid clothes and make a mess," he snarled. "Water costs money, and you're just wasting it. You're nothing but bad luck." My grip on the rolling pin tightened. "Dad," I said. He turned, and his eyes fell on the rolling pin in my hand. He froze. "What are you doing with that?" "Just one question." I walked right up to him, looking up into his face. "You went gambling again today, didn't you?" His brow furrowed. "When did a little punk like you get the right to question me?" "Get lost," he spat. "How much did you lose?" I asked again. His hand flew up to slap me, but I was ready. I swung the rolling pin in a wide arc, cracking it squarely against his kneecap. "Arc!" My dad howled in pain, hopping around on one foot. "Are you out of your damn mind?" I swung again, this time connecting with his shin. His legs buckled, and he crumpled to the ground, staring at me in disbelief. "You dare hit me? I'm your father. I know you're my father." I brought the rolling pin down hard on his back. "My father is supposed to provide for his family, but instead you take all our money to lose at cards. You want us all to starve." My mom rushed in and grabbed my arm. "Edward, what are you doing? That's your father. Let go," I said, looking her straight in the eye. The moment our eyes met, she flinched, but her grip didn't loosen. Grandma June scrambled over, plopped down on the ground, and started wailing. "It's a sin, a crime against heaven. A grandson hitting his own father. The gods must be blind." I watched her little performance for 2 seconds, then slammed the end of the rolling pin into the dirt. "Grandma, you say one more word, and you're next." Her wailing cut off instantly, like a strangled chicken. My mom seized the chance to pull me back. "Have you lost your mind? You can't hit your own father." "Why not?" I retorted, shrugging off her hand and hoisting the rolling pin onto my shoulder. "Edward, aren't I? The precious son, the apple of this family's eye." All three of them stared at me. "And what does that mean?" I asked. "It means I'm the one who carries on the family name. I'm the hope of our family, as you always say," I said, emphasizing every word. "And since I'm the star of this family, doesn't that mean I can hit whoever I want? I'll hit whoever I please." My dad scrambled to his feet, using the wall for support and gritting his teeth in pain. "You little monster." I pointed the rolling pin at him. "Old man, you shut your mouth. You go out and lose every last cent, leaving me at home with watery porridge so thin I can see my own reflection. You call this a life?" At my words, his face turned crimson and he lunged at me. Grandma grabbed his arm. "Greek, no, you can't hit him," she pleaded, nearly falling to her knees. "He's our only heir, the only boy in 3 generations. If you hurt him, the family line ends." That seemed to snap my mom out of it, and she quickly moved to block me. "That's right. You can't touch him. Edward is the most precious thing in this family." I almost laughed out loud. A minute ago, these two were sobbing about how I was an ungrateful, monstrous child. The second it looked like I might be the one getting hit, they instantly became my personal bodyguards. In their eyes, my dad was the son, and I was the grandson. But the grandson was worth a lot more than the son, because only the grandson could carry on the Grant family name. The logic was insane, but in their world, it made perfect sense. Held back by the two women, my dad was shaking with rage. "Have you both lost your minds? He just hit me. He hit his own father." Wiping away tears, Grandma said, "Ricky, just be patient with him. He's just a child, only 10 years old. How much strength could he possibly have?" My mom chimed in. "Exactly, you're his father. You can't get on his level. He's just trying to be close to you, you see? It's like they say, tough love." I nearly choked, trying not to laugh. My dad's eyes looked like they were about to pop out of his head. "Close?" He smashed me with a rolling pin. "It's a lesson in love," I said seriously, thumping the end of the rolling pin on the ground. "All day long, you two lecture Miriam about how sparing the rod spoils the child. Well, today it's my turn to teach you a lesson, to keep you from straying." My dad was speechless, and Grandma just stared. My mom mumbled under her breath, "I don't think that's how that saying works." I didn't have time to give her an English lesson. I took a couple of steps forward with the rolling pin, closing in on my dad. He scrambled backward, tripped over the threshold, and landed hard on his butt. I looked down at him. "How much did you lose today?" His lips trembled, but he stayed silent. I raised the rolling pin. "$300, he yelped. $300. I lowered the rolling pin and crouched down in front of him. "Dad, let's do the math. What's our total family income? Between the farm and your odd jobs, we pull in $3,000 a month tops. You lose $300 today, $500 tomorrow. What am I supposed to use to get married someday? Don't you always say I'm the hope of this family? That your whole life is for me?" He didn't say anything, but my mom and Grandma were nodding furiously. "If that's the case, then when you gamble away your money, you're gambling away my future. So I'm making an official announcement. From this day forward, Rick Grant, if you ever gamble again, I will beat you every single time." I stood up, brushing the dust from my knees. "If you quit now, this family might just have a chance. But if you insist on running us into the ground," I pressed the end of the rolling pin against his cheek, "then I'll just have to get rid of the problem at its source." Hearing this, my dad's face hardened. He grabbed a nearby wooden stick, trying to reclaim some of his parental authority. Grandma lunged and held him back, whispering, "Just humor him for now. Edward's just a kid. He's just pretending to be a tough guy. Wait until he's at school, then you can teach him a lesson. Don't push him right now." My mom mom nodded along eagerly, but my dad was too furious to listen. "The little monster thinks he's all grown up now, does he?" he roared. "Today, I'm going to show you who's really in charge of this house." I didn't flinch. "Then go ahead and kill me. If you kill me, you can go back to praying to whatever God you want. Beg them for another son, because without me, the Grant family name dies with you." Grandma was pacing frantically on the verge of begging my dad to stop. My mom looked like she might drop to her knees at any second. The air in the yard went still and cold. After a long silence, my dad was the one who finally backed down. He let out a loud snort, turned, and stormed into the house. Just then, I heard a slight movement from the corner of the yard. I turned and saw my sister, still crouched by the spigot, a wet piece of clothing in her hand. She was staring at me like I was an alien who had just landed. She was 12, 2 years older than me, rail-thin with a pale, yellowish complexion. But you could already see the delicate features taking shape. Hearing the commotion, my mom immediately redirected all her frustration onto Miriam. She snatched a piece of firewood from the ground and swung it right at my sister's head. "You useless girl," she screeched. "Do you think this is a show? What are you gawking at? Get inside and start the fire for dinner. You want us all to starve? What good are you, you freeloader?" The stick was about to connect with Miriam's face. In a flash, I shoved my mom aside and stood in front of my sister. My mom stumbled back, looking completely stunned. "Edward, why did you push me?" "She's with me," I declared, planting my hands on my hips. "I dare anyone to lay a finger on her. I was just watching Sons of Anarchy the other day. Jax Teller protects his crew, so you're not allowed to hit her. If you hurt her, what's that going to do to my reputation at school?" Miriam hid behind me, her wide, teary eyes blinking in confusion. She probably never dreamed that her little brother, whose favorite pastime was making her miserable, would suddenly be defending her. But that was fine. She would get used to it. That beating kept my dad in line for a solid 3 days. On the 4th day, while I was at school, he snuck out to gamble again. When he got home that night, he found me waiting for him at the door. In one hand, I held a rolling pin. In the other, a meat cleaver. His knees buckled, and he almost fell right there. "Hey, Edward, what are you doing with that knife? A kid your age shouldn't be playing with things like that. Besides, I only played one little game." "Just one?" I asked, casually brandishing the rolling pin and the cleaver. "How much did you lose?" "F50, just $50. That's still money." I swung the rolling pin and cracked him on the shin again. "I thought we had an agreement. No more gambling." He yelped and tried to run inside, but I chased him around the yard, beating him the whole way. My mom and grandma tried to intervene, but one look from me sent them scurrying back inside. That night, my dad slept on his stomach. The next day, he walked with a severe limp. When the neighbors asked, he just mumbled something about tripping and falling. This became a regular routine. Every time he snuck out to gamble, he'd come home to find me waiting with a knife, or he'd wake up in the middle of the night to see me standing over his bed, or open his eyes in the morning to the sight of me and my cleaver. After a month of this, he stopped gambling altogether. I guess he finally figured it out. This kid isn't just trying to scare me. He'll actually do it. I think I'm afraid of him. Ever since I took charge, the whole vibe of the house changed. Before, this place was my dad's one-man show. Now, it was my turn in the spotlight. My dad started working from dawn till dusk. He got our small plot of land into shape and started picking up odd jobs all over town for extra cash. And every single cent he earned, he handed over to Miriam. It made sense. Miriam was now the most educated person in the house, even though she was only in 6th grade. At first, she was really uncomfortable with the responsibility, always suspecting there was some kind of trick. She never wanted to take the money, but I insisted, basically making her the family's chief financial officer. A little girl, now in charge of the household budget. Because of this, her position in the family was no longer at the bottom of the food chain. But she knew full well that this newfound power was entirely because of me. The first thing she did every morning was check my mood. The second I asked for something, she'd scurry off to get it, terrified of displeasing me. "Miriam, you done with your homework?" "Why, yes, it's done." "Let me see." She nervously handed me her notebook. I flipped through the pages. Her handwriting was perfect, neat, and precise. The 6th grade material was already way over my adult head. "Okay," I said. "From now on, you're in charge of my homework, too." She just stared at me. "You're my big sister, aren't you? It's a sister's sacred duty to do her little brother's homework." I slapped my own notebook down in front of her. "Just make sure you copy my handwriting. Don't make it obvious." She stood there, a notebook in each hand, completely bewildered. The look on her face was a complicated mix of emotions. I patted her on the shoulder. "Do a good job, and if anyone gives you trouble, I'll handle them." She was quiet for a long moment before asking softly, "Aren't you going to try to study? The teachers always say that for poor kids like us, school is the only way out." "That path's not for me," I said. "How do you know if you don't even try?" she pressed. "Look, the world needs security guards, janitors, construction workers, and farmers. Not everyone is meant to sit in an air-conditioned office." That just confused her even more, and she stayed confused for most of the semester. Then the final exam scores came out. I got a 10 in English and an 18 in math. My combined score was lower than my dad's shoe size. The teacher called me out in front of the whole class, announcing I was dead last in our grade. I just grinned, not feeling embarrassed at all. Next to me, Miriam's face went white. Edward, with grades like these, maybe I should tutor you? I'm first in our class, you know. I shook my head. Miriam, you just focus on yourself. You're already at the top. The only ways to go from there are down or sideways. Me, I'm at the bottom. The only way I can go is up. My logic left her completely speechless. With my brain, it wouldn't have been hard to get decent grades in 4th grade. But I knew I wasn't cut out for academics. Even if I managed a temporary boost, I'd just come crashing down eventually. It was better to shatter any expectations from start. Besides, Miriam was the real protagonist of this book. She wasn't just smart. Her grades were terrifyingly good. I couldn't be the one to drag her down and ruin her future. She walked with her head down the entire way home. What are you thinking about? I asked, kicking a pebble out of the path. You've been quiet this whole time. Edward, she said, finally looking up. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? You're failing on purpose. You can always calculate exactly how much money Dad loses. I don't believe you can't do simple addition and subtraction. You're right, I admitted. It's on purpose. She looked up shocked. I can't give our family any false hope, I explained with a small smile. If I do, sooner or later they'll take away your only chance to get out of here. She was quiet for a long time. So what do you want to be when you grow up? She finally asked. Me? I thought about my past life, dashing around the city in a DoorDash shirt. A security guard, I guess. Saves me 30 years of detours, trying to be something I'm not. I'd probably end up there anyway. She blinked. Then I'll study really hard. One day, I'll be a CEO, and you could be the head of security at my company. How about that? It's a deal. After that, she hit the books harder than ever. By the time I started middle school, Miriam was starting to transform. Local boys hitting puberty started loitering on the path she took to and from school every day. At first, they just stare from distance. Then came the whistling and catcalls, and eventually they started blocking her way. I'd already taken on the job of sister's personal bodyguard, as my life's calling, escorting her to and from school every day. Sure enough, one day on the way home, someone grabbed my collar from behind. Teach, this isn't a mugging, a rough voice stammered. I spun around and slapped him across the face. Mugging me for what? My money or my virtue? I asked. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Edward. The guy just stood there, holding his cheek, stunned. And Noah, am mugging. I slapped him again. Mugging my foot. My sister is 13 years old. Are you blind? Can't you see she's our town's very own Scarlett Johansson? The kid's eyes started to well up. Hey, I'm mugger. I'm a mugger. Get it? He cried. I put on a look of sudden understanding, then followed it up with a swift kick to his chest. A Dieter? I only weigh 100 pounds. What I need a diet for? The guy crumpled to the ground, crying and holding his head. I just wanted to mug someone, he sobbed. Is that so much to ask? The moment he went down, 3 more guys emerged from a nearby grove of trees. I recognized the leader. His name was Spike, a notorious troublemaker a few grades above me. He was flanked by a heavy-set kid and a skinny one, both with faces that screamed, I'm a tough guy. Well, if it isn't Miriam Grant, Spike sneered, blocking our path and letting his eyes roam all over my sister. Getting prettier every day. Miriam immediately shrank behind me. I wasn't scared. Fights aren't about size or age. They're about who's meaner and who's willing to fight dirty. Spike finally noticed me. Who the hell are you? Get out of the way. I just stared at him, silent. He took a step forward, reaching out to shove me. I grabbed his wrist, twisted it down, and drove my knee up hard right between his legs. Spike let out a strangled yelp, doubling over and collapsing to the ground, clutching his groin. His 2 buddies stood there, stunned, with no idea what had just happened. I walked over and kicked each of them in the shin. They went down howling. In an instant, all 3 of them were writhing on the dirt path. I crouched down in front of Spike and patted his cheek. Do you know who she is? He was in too much pain to speak, just whimpering. She's my sister, the most important person in my crew. She's the one who does my homework. She's also my future meal ticket, I said slowly and clearly. You want to mess with her, you have to go through me first. Got it. He nodded his head frantically. Remember this. From now on, when you see her, you walk the other way. If I ever catch you even looking in her direction again, I'll break all 3 of your legs. With that, I grabbed Miriam's hand and we left. We walked about 50 yards before she tugged on my sleeve. What's up? I asked. She kept her head down, but I could see the tips of her ears were bright red. That back there, thank you, Edward. For what? You're my sister. You're my responsibility. If I don't look out for you, who will? She looked up at me, her eyes shining. Edward, I'm going to study so hard so I can give you that cushy security job at my company one day. I laughed. Sound good, but just so we're clear, I'm going to need a team of at least 10 guards under me. 20 would be better. That's the only way to live up to the reputation I'm building around here. So you better study like crazy and make that company huge. She blinked, then a small, determined smile spread across her face. I will. By the time I started middle school, Miriam was already in high school. Luckily, we ended up at the same school. She got in on pure merit. I got in because my parents made a hefty donation. That was my idea, of course. A professional bodyguard needs to stay close to his VIP. Middle school was way more interesting than elementary school. It was the county's main school, so kids came from all the surrounding towns. Within the first month, some upperclassmen were already trying to shake down us freshmen for protection money. They cornered us on a path outside the cafeteria at lunch. The leader was a guy with long hair and a cigarette hanging from his lips. His face practically screamed, "I own this place." Behind him stood 4 or 5 big guys who looked like they were on the football team. "You're new, right?" the long-hair guy asked, looking us over. "Paid your protection fee?" Miriam instinctively grabbed my sleeve. I patted her hand reassuringly and stepped forward. "How much?" The guy flashed a knowing smirk. $5 a head. That'll buy you a month of peace and quiet." $5, I repeated, glancing at the crew behind him. "How many of you are there?" "6 of us," he said, flicking his ash, looking proud. "What, you think that's too much?" "It's a bargain. Lowest price in the whole county. You just pay up and nobody in this school will ever bother you again." Before he could finish, I kicked him square in the gut. He flew backward, knocking over the guys behind him like bowling pins. I walked over and planted my foot on his chest. "Protection fee?" I said, looking down at him. "Do you have any idea who I am?" His face went pale. He struggled, but I held him pinned. "The name's Edward Grant," I said, bending down to pat his cheek. "Doesn't ring a bell?" His eyes widened in panic. "Then allow me to introduce myself properly." I took my foot off his chest. "I'm Edward Grant, and this is my sister, Miriam. We're both number 1 at this school. She's number 1 in academics, and I'm number 1 in fighting. You mess with me, and I'll make sure you don't last another week here." The long-haired guy clutched his stomach as he and his crew scrambled away, limping. "You just wait," he yelled over his shoulder. "You're going to regret this." Miriam stood beside me, her face pale as a ghost. "You scared?" I asked, patting her shoulder. "Don't worry. Guys like that are all talk. They only pick on people they think are weak. You hit them once, and they'll leave you alone." She shook her head. "I'm not scared. It's just what?" She looked up at me, her eyes a little red. "You always protect me like this. I don't know how I'll ever pay you back." I broke into a grin. "Pay me back? I already told you how. You study hard, you make a lot of money, and then you let me be your professionally supported brother." She blinked. "That's your life's ambition. Yeah, why hustle when you can coast?" I put an arm around her shoulder as we started walking again. "You handle the hard work. I'll handle the relaxing and enjoying." She looked down and said quietly, "But when I'm successful, I'd still want you to be the boss." "Being the boss is too much work," I said. I waved her off. "Don't burden me with that kind of kindness." She fell silent, but I saw her clench her fists. Perfect. Watching my heroic sister get more and more motivated just made me smile. My path to a comfortable early retirement was looking smoother than ever. Being a side character in a heroine's power fantasy story meant I was basically blessed with good luck. It wasn't like being in the hero's story where everyone around him ends up dead or maimed. The year I was a freshman in high school, Miriam was a senior. Something big happened at home. My dad had met some guy who told him about a factory owner in town looking for a wife. The owner was rich, but he was also hideously ugly. The offer was tempting, though, $100,000 dowry. My dad's interest was piqued. That night, he called Miriam and me into the living room. He was wringing his hands, looking both hesitant and excited. "So, there's something I want to talk to you two about." I was leaning back in my chair, legs crossed. "Spit it out," I said. He shot me a look, swallowed hard, and turned to Miriam. "Miriam, honey, you're 18 now. It's time to start thinking about your future. There's a businessman in town. He's very well off, and he'd like to meet you." The color instantly drained from Miriam's face. I slammed my bowl down on the table. "A businessman? What kind of business?" My dad quickly explained. "He owns a factory, has a house, a car. He can definitely provide for a family. Marry him, and you'll be set for life." This was already sounding bad. I rolled my eyes. "Let me guess. This businessman isn't exactly young, is he? What does he look like?" He hesitated. "Well, his appearance is a little, but with men, it's not about looks. It's about being a good provider." "A little what?" I asked, getting to my feet and walking toward him. "A beer gut. Over 50. My dad backed away, stammering, unable to get a full sentence out. My mom cut in. "Edward, don't be so aggressive. What's the harm in meeting him? What if your sister actually likes him? She could have an easy life." "She won't." I cut her off. "Just look at yourselves. The expressions on your faces tell me everything I need to know. The guy's a monster. Probably a creep, too. A toad trying to get his hands on a swan." My dad's temper flared. "Why are you being so difficult? He's offering $100,000. That's enough to tear down this dump and build a new house." "A new house?" I said, staring him down. "You're going to sell my sister for a new house? It's not selling, it's marriage. Daughters get married. That's what they do." I strode over and grabbed him by the collar. "Dad, do you remember what I told you a few years ago?" The color drained from his face. "I warned you. I told you if you ever try to pull something like this with my sister, you would regret it." His lips trembled. "I wasn't trying anything. I was just introducing her to a potential suitor." I punched him square in the face. "How about I find a suitor for you tomorrow? I'm sure there's some rich guy in the county who's into men. I can help you find a shortcut in life, too." He howled and fell to the floor, clutching his face. My mom shrieked and lunged at me. I shoved her aside. "Why don't you marry him?" Hearing the noise, my grandma ran out of her room and, upon seeing the scene, immediately switched in her trademark wailing mode. "Oh, dear heavens, not again, not again. A son hitting his own father. It's a sin." "Shut up!" up, I said, pointing at her. Say one more word, and I'll ship you off to a nursing home. Her crying stopped so abruptly, it was like flipping a switch. I looked down at my dad on the floor and grabbed the rolling pin from behind the door. He saw it, and his face went white. Edward, I'm your father. What's gotten into you? The rolling pin came down hard on his back. You're the one who's possessed. I told you to stop gambling, and you actually listened. I almost thought you'd changed. I hit him again. But now you're trying to sell your daughter? I'm not selling her, he yelled. I'm doing this for you. If we don't fix this house, how will you ever find a wife? I have complete faith in my sister, I said. She's going to make plenty of money. And when she's rich, I'll be rich. You think I'll have trouble finding a wife then? This is my future. Stay out of it. If you're so eager to sell someone, why don't you sell yourself? My dad lay on the floor, protecting his head, not daring to say a word. My mom knelt beside him, sobbing hysterically. Edward, stop. You're going to kill him. If he dies, he'll have deserved it. I took a deep breath and planted the rolling pin on the floor. Now listen up. From this day on, whether Miriam gets married and who she marries is her decision and her decision alone. Anyone who tries to force her will have to get through me first. My dad, still on the floor, nodded frantically. I turned to look at Miriam. She was standing in the doorway, eyes red, biting her lip as she stared at me. I walked over and patted her shoulder. It's handled. She suddenly threw her arms around me and burst into tears. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. I just stood there, completely frozen. In 2 lifetimes, this was the first time a girl had ever hugged me like that. Miriam, okay, that's enough, I said awkwardly. People can see us. She didn't seem to hear, just held on tighter and cried harder. Damn it. Now my own eyes were starting to get watery. The heroine unleashing her ultimate crying ability right in front of you is a powerful thing. That main character energy is no joke. Eventually, Miriam got into Ohio State University in Columbus. I didn't get in, but I moved to the city with her anyway. I found a security job nearby. Life was pretty decent. I was earning my own money, which felt good. Miriam would visit on weekends, bringing food, doing my laundry, and tidying up my small apartment. I told her she didn't have to, but she'd just say, I'm used to it. Then, during the summer after her sophomore year, she told me a guy was pursuing her. A guy? I asked. I set my popsicle down. What kind of man are we talking about? He owns a company, she said. He's young and handsome. She dropped her gaze, a light blush coloring her cheeks. But he's a little weird. Weird how he's always sending me gifts. And he hired people to follow me. He claims it's to protect me, but when I tell him to stop, he just ignores me. Alarm bells started blaring in my head. This was the exact playbook of the psycho CEO from the original novel. First, the gifts, then the stalking, and finally, a one-way ticket to his basement. What's his name? I asked. Damien Thorne. Of course. A name like that just screamed main character. A guy named Edward Grant, on the other hand, was clearly destined to be a sidekick. I shot out of my chair so fast it made her jump. What's wrong? She asked, startled. Nothing, I said, taking a deep breath. Take me to meet him tomorrow. I didn't sleep a wink that night. My mind raced, trying to figure out how to tell her the truth. How do you explain that you're from another world? That you've read a book where she gets kidnapped by a psycho and locked in a basement? And that later, to express his love, this guy murders our entire family. She'd think I was insane. But if I didn't tell her, how could I explain why I was about to go find this Damien Thorne and beat the hell out of him? The next morning, I walked outside with 2 huge bags under my eyes. Miriam was already waiting downstairs. She took one look at me and asked, what did you do? Rob a bank last night? Miriam, I said, looking at her seriously, there's something I have to tell you. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Okay, talk and walk. We set off down the quiet morning street, side by side. I opened my mouth to speak a few times, but couldn't find the right words to begin. Finally, she broke the silence. Okay, just say it. You've been hiding something from me for years, haven't you? I froze. She kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead. I always knew something wasn't right, she said, her voice perfectly calm. Before you turned 10, you were just like any other annoying little brother. Your favorite hobby was making my life miserable. You would never have defended me. I said nothing, but after your 10th birthday, it was like you became a completely different person. She turned to look at me. The day you hit Dad with the rolling pin, I was over by the spigot. He glanced back at me, and in that one look I knew, you weren't the same Edward anymore. I stopped walking, and she stopped too, turned to face me. The old Edward would never have protected me, she said. The old Edward would have just joined Mom and Dad in calling me a useless freeloader. If the old Edward got picked on, he'd come home and take it out on me. But you didn't do that. You stood up to our parents. You even shut down Grandma. You beat up the kids who bullied me. You pushed me every single day to study hard, saying you'd be fine just being a security guard. I knew you had your reasons, but I didn't care. Her eyes were red, but no tears fell. So I just want to say this. I don't care who you are. You're my brother. For a moment, I was utterly speechless. She walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. Okay, now tell me, what is it you've been hiding? What's the real story with this Damien Thorne? I took a deep breath and told her everything. The rebirth, the novel, the dark romance, the captivity, the unhinged CEO, and the part where our entire family gets slaughtered. When I finished, she was silent for a very long time. Long enough for a knot of dread to form in my stomach. I was terrified she wouldn't believe me, that she'd think I was crazy and look at me differently from then on. But then she started to laugh. "That's it," she said, shaking her head. "That's the big secret you've been carrying all these years." I was expecting something much worse. I was completely floored. "Miriam, you're not scared?" "Scared of what?" "In the book, you're the heroine. You're supposed to be the one locked up by a psycho." She gave me a strange look. "Edward, let me ask you something. If a novel has a protagonist, who's really in control of the story?" I thought for a second. "The author." She shook her head. "The protagonist. You still the hair, stunned. Watching you fight your way through everything all these years, I've learned a thing or two," she said with a small smile. "If I really am the heroine of this book, then my fate is my own to decide. I get to choose the hero. And if I don't choose him," she paused, a flicker of something new and fierce in her eyes, "then he's just a nobody." I just stood there, my mind completely blank. Miriam reached out and patted my cheek. "Come on, forget about meeting this Damien guy. Let's go get some barbecue. I got my scholarship money," she said. My treat. I felt like I was in a fog the entire meal. Even after we had demolished a mountain of food, my head was still spinning. Miriam patted my shoulder. "What are you daydreaming about?" "Miriam," I said, looking at her, "you're really not afraid of being kidnapped?" She smiled. "Not one bit. You said it yourself. I'm the heroine. The authors who write these kinds of stories always end up favoring the heroine. As long as I decide I want nothing to do with him, the plot will have to find a new direction. You just wait and see." "I'm still not sure," I said. "Don't worry," she said, linking her arm through mine as we walked. "Edward, I'm a grown-up now. It's my turn to act like the big sister. From now on, I'll protect you. I promise. None of that horrible stuff you talked about is ever going to happen." I glanced at her profile and was hit with a strange sense of dissonance. When had the little girl who used to hide behind me at the slightest sound turned into this person? After that day, Damien Thorne completely vanished from our lives. I heard his company ran into some trouble and he was swamped. Later, rumor had it he'd fallen for some other woman. I didn't care what happened to him. It had nothing to do with us anymore. It was just like Miriam had said. She was the heroine of this story, and she got to decide who the hero was. After graduation, Miriam got a job at a major corporation in Chicago. She started at the very bottom and worked her way up rung by rung. 5 years later, she was a vice president, and I was still a security guard. One day, she showed up at my small rental apartment loaded down with groceries. "When are you going to come work for me?" she asked, walking toward the kitchen. "Doing what?" "Running the security department," she said, slapping a business card down on my coffee table. "I created the position just for you. $200,000 a year. Full benefits, bonuses, stock options, the works." I looked down at the card. "Director of Corporate Security." I laughed. "I'm just a security guard. I'm not director material." "You're my brother," she said, her eyes shining. "I'm a vice president. What's wrong with my brother being a director?" I scratched my head. "Won't that be a little obvious?" "Let it be obvious." "Who cares?" She pressed the card into my hand. "You know what they say? A rising tide lifts all boats. I've already got my future kids' careers planned out." I stared down at the business card, and a flood of memories came rushing back. In elementary school, she did my homework. In middle school, I beat up the bullies for her. In high school, I stopped our parents from marrying her off. She went to college, graduated, became a VP, and then she turned around and pulled me up with her right into a director's chair. In my last life, I spent my days in a DoorDash uniform, delivering food all over the city. In this life, I'd finally moved up in the world. I looked up at her. She was standing by the window, sunlight catching in her hair. She was 30 now, but in her face, I could still see the ghost of that skinny little girl from all those years ago. "All right," I said. "Thanks." She beamed. "Thanks for what?" "You're my brother. Who else am I going to look out for?" I was stunned for a second, and then I started to laugh. Those words sounded familiar. More than a decade ago, I think I'd said the exact same thing to her. And just like that, I became the director of corporate security at her company. My daily routine consisted of sitting in my office, drinking coffee, reading the news, and occasionally strolling through the corporate campus to see if any of the guards were slacking off. The pay was insane. I never made so much money in my life. The year-end bonus was even more absurd. Miriam would drop by my office, sometimes to chat about work. Occasionally, in the middle of a conversation, she'd say, "Do you remember that first time you beat up Dad? I was terrified back then. I really thought you had lost your mind. So are you still scared now?" I asked. She just smiled, her gaze drifting out the window. Later, she said, "I started being afraid of something else. I was afraid you were just a dream, and that one day I'd wake up and you'd be gone." I didn't say anything. She turned back to me, her eyes glistening slightly. "So, thank you." I waved it off. "We're family. You don't have to thank me." She got up and walked to the door, then turned back. "Oh, by the way, I'm getting married. I want you to be my man of honor." "Your man of honor?" I repeated, confused. "Who's the groom?" "The CEO of our company," she said, grinning from ear to ear. "Don't worry. This one's a real CEO. He's kind, gentle, and completely reliable. None of that twisted drama you were so worried about is going to happen. Not a single bit." "Congratulations, Miriam," I said. "I hope you'll be happy forever." After she left, I sat in my office, just staring out into the sunlight. In my last life, I was a delivery guy, running dozens of orders a day through all kinds of weather until my legs felt like they didn't belong to me. In this life, I'm a director of security security, sipping coffee, enjoying the sunshine, and waiting to go home for dinner. Life, it turns out, is pretty damn good. Just then my phone buzzed. It was an iMessage from Miriam. Lunch tomorrow. Remember to bring the rolling pin. I want to show my fiance our family heirloom. I texted back a single word, no. Then I tossed the phone on my desk and went back to enjoying the afternoon sun. I could hear birds singing outside, smell the flowers from the garden below, and listen to the steady, rhythmic footsteps of my guards on their patrol. I closed my eyes and couldn't stop myself from smiling. Last life, a delivery driver. This life, a director. If I ever get the chance to do it all over again, in the next life, I think I'd still want to be her brother. The end of this story isn't a simple happily ever after. It's a profound reminder. Fate might be a book, but we are its sole authors. The protagonist's rebirth might seem like a superpower, a way to see the future, but what he truly changed wasn't a specific plot point, but the toxic environment where tragedy was born. He didn't wait for the villain to make a move. He struck first, turning his fists inward against the cowardly, dysfunctional, and prejudiced family system. That rolling pin didn't just break his father's gambling habit. It shattered the invisible chains of that's just how things are that bound their family. The casual sexism, the expected sacrifice of their daughter, and the default habit of blaming the weakest member for every misfortune. This offers our first key insight. Real salvation isn't about weathering the storm outside, but about rebuilding the order within. In our own lives, don't we all have scripts we're expected to follow? They come from family expectations, societal pressures, or the mental blocks we create for ourselves. We often wait for a lucky break or a hero to save us, forgetting that the first lever to change our destiny is in our own hands. Sometimes that change requires a form of violence, not of the fist, but the courage to shatter old patterns, the resolve to say no to injustice, and the conviction to redefine our own worth. The story's second layer of depth is found in the flow of strength between the siblings. The brother's initial protection gave his sister the space she needed to breathe and grow. In turn, her eventual success provided him with a safe harbor of stability and dignity. Theirs is not a one-way street of rescue. They are a symbiotic partnership, each making the other whole. The brother's brute force shielded her from the immediate dangers, while her strategic vision paved his way to a secure future. This reveals a second truth. We are all both protectors and the protected. In playing one role, we are shaped and completed by another. The protagonist says the only role he ever mastered was her brother. This isn't self-deprecation. It's a statement of profound focus. We don't always need to be the all-powerful hero. Sometimes it's enough to simply be the best we can be in the one role that matters most. When we protect what we cherish, that act of guardianship will, in ways we can't foresee, come back to reward and reshape us. So, as the curtain falls, we see more than just a satisfying tale of an underdog's triumph and a heroine's empowerment. We see a choice and a possibility. The story encourages us to examine our own life's script, to identify the core we are meant to protect, and then to find that little bit of irrational courage needed to rewrite a better future for ourselves and for those we love. Because in the end, the author of your life is you. And the greatest stories always begin the moment you tear up the first draft and start again.